Good morning, creative warriors. Let's see, got a new setup, so there may be some technological hiccups. You guys let me know. Welcome to the Warriors Pen, Season 1, Episode 6. Today we're going to discuss, and I hope you join me, we're going to discuss how you need, and something that happens to every writer, your protagonist needs a worthy enemy. And this is really there's one really important point in any story. You need a worthy enemy. And this is where a lot of writers, authors, they just have problems. So let's get into it a little bit today, and we're going to dive in. So the first thing you have to understand is, if your villain is weak, your story is going to be weak. I'll give you an example. One that I recently, and this is also dating myself, but there's a moment in the movie Rogue One where, and if you haven't seen this, really, what are you doing? But there's a moment in Rogue One where I'm trying to hope not to spoil it for anyone, where Darth Vader appears, and all he does is turn on his saber, his lightsaber, and all you see is this red beam of light, and you hear the the breathing. And that moment is one of the highlights of the movie, because you understand the villain, you understand the presence of Darth Vader, and you understand how strong and what kind of a threat he poses. So you have to have do your best to have that kind of villain in your story. If your antagonist is incompetent and your hero is unimpressive, that makes it that really kind of kills your story. But your protagonist, your main character, is only as powerful as the force that opposes it. So you have to have something that, or someone that's going to be as worthy as your hero. You need that. It's important. If not, the story kind of falls apart. So remember that today, and every time we do the Warrior's Pen, we're blending warrior philosophy with writing discipline. And so I take examples from history. I take examples from Spartans, from samurai, from different historical warriors, and try to bring their ethos, their discipline, or their philosophy, better said, into the writing discipline. What we need to do as authors. Okay, so today's the warrior frame. It's like, because this is so important, right? History remembers commanders not for their easy victories, but for the worthy opponents, right? If you have a general, they don't get honor from defeating chaos. They're supposed to do that. They earn it by overcoming discipline. Um, Samurai, the reason we still speak about samurai, even today, where there are no more samurai, the samurai don't exist as a class in Japan. But the reason why we speak about samurai today is because of the many duels that they had. A samurai skill wasn't displayed in the chaos. A samurai skill was displayed in the true duel, in a duel that they would have. And you hear about Miyamoto Musashi and how he had 60 duels that he won all of them. And there are other historical samurai who were known for their duels, not for how they rushed into battle, but the duels that they encountered and how they met those duels with mastery. So if you don't have resistance, if there's no resistance, if your protagonist doesn't have a worthy antagonist, then there's not going to be any demonstration of mastery. So if if you don't have a worthy enemy, then your story is lacking weight. I hope that makes sense. If your hero, your main character, can have all the abilities and the skills, but if they don't have a worthy enemy, something that comes up against them and challenges them and provides a resistance, then right there your story loses its weight. So you have to always understand that, yes, you may have an amazing hero, but you also are amazing main character, but you need equally an amazing villain, an amazing antagonist. This is really important. I really want you to kind of internalize this. Excuse me. And I hope you brought your coffee today. So, how do writers sabotage their narratives? Boy, this happens a lot. Happened to me early on in my writing, and I always try to keep vigilant against this happening even now. So many writers sabotage their narratives. So they create villains who make obvious mistakes. Please don't do this. Don't make your villains unintelligent, or don't make them unintelligent to make your main character or your protagonist look good. So really make them worthy of going up against. The other thing is the conflicts. Another way to sabotage a narrative is the conflicts get solved too easily. So they're not really conflicts if they're going to be solved that easy. Make it worthwhile. Another way, and I'm guilty of all these, so don't think of these as me pointing the finger at you. This is me pointing the finger at me first, and then sharing what I've learned with you. You have conflicts that solve too easily, and you have opposition that collapses under minimal pressure. Again, your antagonists have to be resilient as well, or else they're not much of an antagonist if they collapse that easily. Why is that important? Why are all these things important? Because real resistance is hard to write. You really got to dig deep, and you got to start thinking about what drives my protagonist, what principles do they stand for, and you have to create a struggle for your protagonist. They can't, if they do things too easily, why would I want to follow the protagonist? Why would I want to read that story if everything comes easily to the protagonist? You also, the other reason is that it exposes your protagonist's limits. And that's really important, because if your protagonist doesn't have limits, they're basically invulnerable, invincible, unstoppable, and that translates into boring. Think about Superman, right? If you have Superman as a hero, if he didn't have kryptonite as a vulnerability, he would be boring man. It would just be a boring superhero because nothing could stop him. The only thing that makes it really interesting when Superman has to face someone is that they can bring in kryptonite, they can overpower him with even more power, that he has a limit. That's what makes a story interesting. This is why, after I think it's 80 years now, that Batman is such a fan favorite. Why? Because he's a man, mortal, regular man, and he faces up against everything because he has limits, and people resonate with that kind of character. You have to give your character limits, and the limits are usually found in their antagonist. That exposure that you've created is the point of that story. You have to expose your protagonist to those limits, to that force, that resistance. Okay, so how do we build a worthy enemy? I'm going to give you the blocks now. Okay, your enemy, and I want you to think about this in the context of, and this is a perfect example, Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty, and how Arthur Conan Doyle used these two characters and created these two characters. Okay, I would say Agnes is in there too, but we'll stick with Moriarty and Holmes. Your antagonist, your enemy, the worthy enemy, has to be capable. They have to have competence. So the first thing is competence. They got to be capable. They have to be strategic, intelligent, and skilled. Don't make them dumb. Don't make them like clueless. Make them strategic, make them intelligent, and make them skilled. If they fail, it shouldn't be because they were foolish or they made a mistake that was easily avoidable. It should be because the protagonist outskilled them, outsmarted them. Okay, so to thwart the antagonist, the protagonist has to be just that much better. If you think about Holmes and Moriarty, it's usually because Holmes solves the clue right before Moriarty does what he's supposed to do, and he comes in and somehow he manages to stop Professor Moriarty, right? That's important. This is really important. What else does your worthy villain have to have? Conviction. Oh, weak villains want power, but strong antagonists believe they are right. A strong antagonist doesn't see themselves as the villain. They see themselves as righteous in what they're pursuing. Think Thanos, right? In the Avengers, It's not that he was wrong. He just said, I need to eliminate half of all life because that's the best solution for what's happening in the universe. So strong antagonists believe they are right. And the protagonist's job is to kind of confront that belief and make them see that they may be wrong. They have conviction. So the conviction creates tension. And so it takes the conflict past just the physical and it makes it ideological. It makes it the protagonist believes one thing and the antagonist believes one thing. And those two beliefs have to crash and meet each other. It's important. What else does a worthy villain have? Resources. Okay, think about, again, we'll go back to Holmes and Moriarty. Moriarty has resources. He has people who work for him. He knows how to get at Holmes. He has the means to do so. He has the connection and the networks. So the worthy enemy has leverage. They have influence. They have authority. They have allies, and they have time, which is a really important resource. The enemy without power is just an obstacle, but an enemy with power is a threat. So think about the times that Holmes has to uncover the layers of what Moriarty is putting. So to get to Moriarty, Holmes has to go through layers and layers of misdirections, of allies, of enemies. But finally, at the end, he gets to Moriarty, who's actually like a puppet master, pulling the strings behind everything. That is a worthy enemy. He's not right there. Oh, you can defeat me easily. You have to work to get to that enemy. That's really important. So remember those four things: influence, authority, allies, time. Really important for your worthy enemy to have those. That's so key. What else does your worthy enemy have to do? They have to be able to be adaptable. They have to have adaptability. So as your protagonist goes up and gets more skilled and gets better, your antagonist has to kind of rise to meet him. This is why, and again, I don't know how, I think it's I don't know how old Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty are, but they've been around for a long time, longer than me. They've been, but why? Because that storytelling, it's not that Holmes outclasses Moriarty or that Moriarty outclasses Holmes, is they're almost equally matched, right? As your protagonist grows, your opposition has to grow too. The escalation requires evolution. They have to grow and adapt. The adaptability is so important. If the antagonist remains static, it doesn't grow, and you can think about all the campy villains from the 70s, 60s Batman TV show. All those villains were campy and they kind of stayed the same. Then the conflict becomes predictable, right? It becomes like, oh, and I always used to hate this. Even as a kid, I would watch those shows, and just as they caught Batman and they put him in a trap that's going to kill him, they give him a speech and then they leave. They walk away. This happened with the early Bond too. They'll have Bond in this table. He's strapped. The lasers coming to slice him in half, and then they just go, "Okay, Bond, I'm gonna leave," and that way you could use your gadget. No, 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 no. If the antagonist doesn't grow, the conflict becomes predictable. So your protagonist evolves and gets better. Your antagonist evolves and becomes even more ruthless or more skilled. It has to have, they both have to kind of match each other. This is what makes them a worthy enemy. This is really important. And so let me give you a flip side of this now, because this is something that a lot of writers encounter, a lot of authors encounter, and they don't know how to deal with it. Sometimes your worthy enemy is not external. And let me say that again. Sometimes the worthy enemy is not external. It's internal enemy. So it could be fear, it could be pride, it could be guilt. Internal enemies can be just as devastating as external ones. If your hero overcomes doubt in a single page in one chapter, you haven't really written doubt. You've just written a convenient vehicle, but that you can't just have it immediately pass like that. It has to be a struggle. If it's going to be a worthy enemy, it has to be something that your main character deals with throughout the story. Okay, so this is really important. It could be fear, it could be pride, it could be guilt, it could be any number of things, but it has to be as formidable, as much resistance, as an external enemy would be. And this is key because this requires you to write your character in a way that humanizes your protagonist in such a way that we all feel fear, we all feel pride, we all feel guilt. And so your readers will be able to resonate with this in a way that maybe an external enemy will not do the same thing. So be really careful with this, but it's really important, and it's potent. It's really something that can make your story even deeper. Okay, testing your scenes. This is again, this is like the application, right? Ask yourself, if you replaced your antagonist with someone more competent, would the story collapse? So let me frame that question again. If you replaced your antagonist with someone more competent, would the story collapse? If it's yes, if the answer to that question is yes, your structure is fragile. Make your enemy stronger, and your protagonist will rise to meet that enemy. It's really important. Okay, let me get my coffee. We're just hanging out today, so don't worry. Okay, some mental discipline because we are the warrior's pen, so we've got to blend the philosophy with the discipline. Okay, and again, I want you to understand that everything that I'm sharing with you here apply to me first, and then I want you to take it and apply it in your adventure as a writer, as a creative. What happens to a lot of authors, writers? They avoid powerful antagonists. Why? Because powerful antagonists complicate the plot. It makes the writing harder. But the complexity, having powerful antagonists and having complex antagonists, increases the depth of your writing. That you've heard two-dimensional characters. You don't want two-dimensional characters. You want three-dimensional, deep characters. So yes, it's going to make the story more complicated, but it's important that you make the story complicated, and it's important that you make your antagonist powerful. Okay, so the complexity the adds depth, and the depth creates impact. So when they finally meet, or when they're confronting each other, when that conflict finally hits, it's deeper. It's a deeper impact, and that makes your story even better. Don't protect your hero, please. I've seen authors, I can't do this to my hero. I can't do this to my main character. No, how? What would I? And it's our tendency as authors to try to protect our heroes, our main characters. No, challenge them. Forced adaptation, make them grow. That's your job as an author. If you're always coddling and protecting your main character, your hero, yeah, the story's gonna be kind of boring. I'm sorry. It's just not gonna create any resonance. You have to challenge them, force them to adapt, make the antagonist do something that they didn't expect or couldn't expect, and demand that your main character grow. Okay. How do we apply this? Giving you some historical significance of how this would work. When samurai would get their blades, they had a body test, how many bodies they could cut through. A blade is tested against resistance. Your characters are tested against resistance in a story that tested against resistance. So your character has to be tested the same way against resistance. Strengthen the enemy, make the enemies, however horrible, powerful, resourceful, intelligent, and skilled your enemy is, make them even more so that your character has to grow to face that. Strengthen the enemy, sharpen the conflict, make the conflict even worse. If it's bad, make it worse. Forge transformation, make your character grow, make him adapt, and make the antagonist grow even more. When your protagonist grows, your antagonist has to grow, and make them keep growing and evolve and adapt to each other. It'll make your story better. It'll make you a better writer, and it'll make the story better. And we're going to close with this. So train daily, not just physically because that's good for you, but as a writer, try to train daily and forge better stories. Down in the description is my Patreon link. So if this episode impacted you and you found something of worth and value in it, please consider joining my Patreon. It's really simple, and we have all tiers from free all the way up. and you can kind of see all this stuff happening live, evolving as stories evolve, because I do chapters, and then they get changed and they get revised and get robustified. So you kind of see all of this live. So consider joining the Patreon. And if you got something from this episode 6, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I will appreciate it. It'll help the channel grow, and hopefully it'll hope what's in here, the content that's in here, help you grow as an author, as a writer, as a creative. So don't forget, we are in this together. We're in this forge. We go in there, and you just gotta, work, grind sometimes, but it'll help you forge better stories. Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care, creative.